Taming the High Cost of College, Episode 99.
You have kids, they grow up, and before you know it, it's time to plan for college.
Where do you start?
How much is it going to cost?
Will you qualify for financial aid?
Should you be looking into scholarships?
When will you be able to retire?
What about student loans?
The list of questions is never ending. The good news is, all the answers are right here. Welcome to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Here is your host, certified financial planner, Brad Baldridge.
Hello, and welcome to Taming the High Cost of College. I'm your host, Brad Baldridge. Today we have a great interview with Sam Feeney. He is the author of Choose the Perfect College for You, and he also has other resources available at mycollegelifecoach.com. So I really enjoyed talking with Sam. He has a very similar philosophy to me, and we spent a little bit of time talking about why we're going to college. And I think that's a big question that most families are not asking. And we explore that a little bit. In other words, why are you interested in college? Why are you going to college? Is it because you are looking to get training for a career? Is it because you need a place to grow up? Is it because mom and dad had a great college experience and they want that for their children? There's all kinds of reasons why parents and students are interested in college. And I think you need to understand your why. To some extent, that will help you determine how much you're willing to spend and what it is that you're looking for as you choose a college. So Sam and I talk about that. I think there's a lot of great nuggets in there. And then we also go through his 5 warning signs your child is applying to the wrong college. And again, I think that's a great learning opportunity as well. So if your student is procrastinating or other things, that may be a sign that you are looking at the wrong college. And perhaps by changing colleges, they might be more interested or more excited. Or there may be other reasons why the college you're interested in is not a good fit. All right, let's go ahead and jump into the interview. All right, today I'm sitting down with Sam Feeney. He is the author of Choose the Perfect College for You. He also has a website at mycollegelifecoach.com, and he's also a podcaster. So welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Brad. I'm excited to be on the show. I appreciate the invite.
All right, so before we jump into some of the stuff that you've written, et cetera, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you came to do what you do?
Well, absolutely. My job is one, and you talked about my title as My College Life Coach, and really the idea behind that is being able to help students and their families find a great college and then one that creates a great life. And so kind of how I arrived at that as through my own experiences. I went to a college called Bucknell University in Pennsylvania, and I didn't have a great college experience. I was at a great school, but it didn't immediately translate into having a great college experience. And so that was really the genesis of a lot of thinking about, I thought I did everything right. I went to a good school, I got good grades, but I thought, you hear people, it's best 4 years of your life, so on and so forth. But that really wasn't the case for me. And I fell into a master's program at a tiny school outside of Philadelphia called Eastern University, and found career development and college planning through that master's in school counseling. And that was it. So I started working as a school counselor in a big high school in suburban Philadelphia, and realized that I wanted to do more with helping kids design a great life and then helping them find a college that will accelerate their journey. And so that's how My College Life Coach came to be.
All right. Well, great. Well, let's start with the book then. And you got the book out there called Choose the Perfect College. And then there's ... for you. So I think there's a hidden meaning in that title. Can you tell us what that's about?
Absolutely. And that, again, kind of goes back to my story. And when I went to school, my goal was, I did what I would call the classic mistakes that unfortunately, still persist. I graduated in the year 2000 from college. And so, 20 years ago, people are still doing the same thing, which was I looked at schools by rankings, primarily U.S. News and World Report, and tried to figure out how I could get into the quote unquote best possible school. And one thing, as I alluded to when I got my master's degree, when I got out of my master's, I had a great time and I'd taken advantage of a ton of opportunities and gotten even better grades in my master's. And I thought, what made those two things different? And so I realized that I had been looking for something different in my master's program than I had in my undergraduate. And so what I really found was there are factors that can help students personalize the college search, and they break down into academics, which hopefully is obvious, but some kids don't go to college for academics. Then there's also campus life, which is what you do the other 150 hours every week when you're not in class. Opportunities, what do you get to do because you go to that school? And then finances, and that's obviously kind of our shared interest in being able to say, once I graduate and I start paying student loans or I get my job or whatever, am I still glad I went to that school? Was that still? So those four factors I really teach in my book, that those four factors are lenses and priorities that each student needs to make for him or herself. And if you do that, that begins a process of finding a college that's a great fit for that person, not just highly ranked or, all the things that I kind of fell for in my undergrad.
So is the book written primarily for students or parents or both, or who should be reading it?
I think students and parents both should be reading it, but I wrote it to the students. One of the biggest things that I find for students that when they don't get the most value out of their college experience, and we talk about, return on investment, ROI, and all of that, a lot of it really comes from a lack of ownership. And so when I work with students and families, I work primarily with the student, and my process really hones in on this idea of the more that the student is aware and owns the decision, the more that they will then really invest themselves in their college experience. So I want to more and more put the student on as the primary target of when I'm speaking with them, when I'm advising them. And then that way, if they make a decision, they're fully in on it.
Right. And I think we've all heard, at least anybody in the education field has heard, there's a number of students out there that are very disenchanted with college. A lot of them that graduated, in the 2008 through 2010 when jobs were tough, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of those kids, felt like they were sold a bill of goods, and that, they spent a lot of money on college. They didn't find that dream job. And I think to kind of put a bow on what you've just said is there's a lot of students out there that feel that all they have to do is show up good grades and the world owes them a job.
Absolutely.
And that it worked that way for a long time, but it doesn't necessarily work that way anymore.
Right. If you look at the genesis of college as an employee prep program, and whether or not that's the case for every school, it really, the onus is more and more on the students to say, well, if this is an employee prep program, for which jobs is it preparing me? And are those relevant? Are they, is that something that I'm seeing as a fast track, or are there a lot of things that companies and businesses are looking for that are beyond just the academic classroom?
Absolutely. So I think that boils down to, and I've mentioned this in the past, as what are your goals for college? Why are you attending college? Is it, again, career training? If you want to be a nurse, you've got to go to nursing school, get your nursing degree, pass your nursing tests, and you become a nurse. If you want to write cell phone apps, at least anybody that's been doing it right now probably has some degree in something else, and they just figured it out along the way.
Correct.
So that's part of the process is and then there's people out there that say you go to college to learn how to learn, or to broaden your horizons, or to study what you're passionate about. And all those things are valid, but what's your recommendation for parents when they're, sitting down with their junior in high school and they're saying, okay, well, why are we going to college? And what should they be talking about? What questions should they be asking? How do you kind of frame up, again, because I like your perspective of, let's build a good life. Let's put college into the mix. But so how do you do that? Where do you start?
Sure.
If you've got that junior.
Well, I love even what you suppose a parent sitting down saying, why are we going to college? That differentiation, and I hope that that's happening. Very few parents and students are having the why conversation. They're very often having the where or what conversations, which presuppose that you are going to college. And I think college in and of itself is awesome. I'm a big fan of it, but I kind of equate this to when I work with my students specifically, I actually flip the whole script on them in terms of this college piece. And I say, you need to write out, for those of you in the business world, you need to write out an RFP, a request for proposal. You need to say, hey, here are the things that I need you to do for me. Can you deliver? And for a student and for a parent, this really reframes the whole relationship between themselves and a college. For most people, this idea of the importance of college is really inflated. And I'll say that the importance of particular colleges is really inflated, that there is one school that is your path to whatever. But what I try to remind parents is this is just a path. What's more important is the destination. And so if I'm going to go, we're near the Atlantic Ocean here. So last summer, my family and I went to the Outer Banks. I planned a lot of what we were going to do when we got there. I didn't really do much planning about the vehicle because the destination was more important than the vehicle. And so for students and parents who get really, really excited and frankly stressed about college, it's because they're really overemphasizing the vehicle and not the destination. So I start from my program is very, very, it's called my True North College program. And it reverse engineers this whole process. Students will come to me and say, hey, well, I want to get into the best college possible. Okay, let's parlay Harvard. Are we talking about that? No. Okay. All right. let's take a step back and then say, well, what's the purpose of college? Well, the purpose of college ostensibly is to prepare me for a great career. Awesome. Do you know what career you want to pursue? Maybe. Got a couple ideas. All right, that's awesome. I'm going to then say, I'm going to propose to them a definition of a career, which is something that helps you either express the best of yourself or helps you pay for an awesome life. Because there's a lifestyle factor there, which is why I didn't go to law school, frankly. Was because of I knew the life I wanted to create, and it didn't necessarily have everything to do with just making cash. And so then I say, okay, well, what's your idea of the best life? And then whose best life is it going to be? Because yours and mine are wildly different. So I talk to the kid. We sit down with the kid. Once they buy into this idea that there's a different way to go about this other than just taking an SAT prep course or, doing a bunch of college tours, I'd rather have a kid know more about himself than he does about his prospective schools. Because schools are, well, a dime a dozen. There's 4,500 of them in the U.S. alone. And that's just four-year schools. If the kid knows about himself and he knows the type of life he wants to create, he'll then start to see college as a way to get to that life. And the stress and the magnitude of that school shrinks down to actual size. And he says, wait, there's a bunch of schools that'll help me get to point B. And then he's free to kind of cut loose. Not only then bargain shopping against each other, which is a lot of fun, and you could probably speak to that better than I, or then saying, how can I, once I've chosen a school, now how do I get the most value out of this possible? And that's really the financial piece for me. I know next to nothing about it, which is why I talk to guys like you. But I'm a big fan of, once you choose a school, how do you get 2, 3, 4 times the value out of it? And that starts with knowing why you're even going there.
Absolutely. I think it can be summarized into doing the whole college process on purpose instead of just stumbling through the motions because that's the way you're supposed to do it.
Right. No one looks back at high school and says, man, like I thought high school was going to get me this and this and this, because the expectation isn't there. But for most people, if the expectation is there for college, but they do college just like they do high school, which is this is just something I have to do, they aren't putting that forethought and that intentionality and that ownership into it. If it's a necessary next step, and again, I recommend it for most kids. If it's a necessary next step, I don't get fired up about paying my taxes. I'm not up studying like how can I do this and this, I do it because it's a necessary thing. And so if a kid knows the purpose of, and I'll even build this because of my life coaching background, I help a kid create a mission statement for his life. If they know the mission of themselves and then what they're hiring the college to do, they are miles ahead of probably 95% of the rest of the kids.
Right. So in looking at your philosophy, which, again, is doing things on purpose and kind of, broader coaching around what do you want to be when you grow up and, where's your life going and what's important to you and those kinds of things. I would guess that there's a certain segment of the population, as far as students out there, who, enjoy that, get involved in that, and jump into that because it's something that they're looking to do and want to do and that makes sense to them. But I would say that there's a lot of parents out there who are thinking in the back of their head, well, that's not my kid. I mean, they go to school because we make them, and they're going to go to college because we're going to make them.
That's right.
And he doesn't know what he wants to be. And, if he had his way, these parents that are thinking, well, they got to get to college and get a degree so they can get a job. I'm afraid to some degree that they might end up on my couch the rest of their life if I don't. I'm the one that's the driving motivation. Can you give us some pointers that if that's your kid? And I'm over emphasizing, right? There's certainly kids
I don't know. That's pretty good read.
Right, are way down on the end of that spectrum where they are going to be on your couch, and essentially parents, no matter what you do, they're going to be on your couch. They're just that kid, unfortunately.
That's right.
But there's a lot of kids that are in between the kid that's got pie in the sky dreams, and they're going to go get them no matter what the parent. The parents are just in the way as far as the kids are concerned.
That's right.
And then there's the other kid on the other end of the spectrum again that's going to end up on mom and dad's couch. But take a kid that's kind of in the middle of that road, who's not real motivated, but maybe they'd read a book if you bought it for them and put it on the on the table in front of them. But they're not going to go look for a book, as an example.
Right.
What are some ideas that parents can work with on that?
Well, there's a Tony Robbins quote that I really enjoy, and he says the quality of your life is determined by the quality of the questions you ask yourself. And so I think even parents and kids asking themselves different questions, like you said, like the why are we going to go to college? Another thing I think is really big, and it's kind of interesting in my work with students and their families. A lot of times, I'll kind of just play the parent by proxy, and I know parents know this because their kids will come home and say, "Hey, my teacher just said this today," and the parents thinking, "I've said that 100 times." Like, how are you listening to this guy, over somebody else? But very often that's kind of the case. And what I recommend the parents and students do is to really kind of just start out on being honest. And I think one of the hesitations that a lot of students have with listening to their parents about college is overnight their mom or their dad have become college experts. And it really isn't necessarily the case. It's just they don't know where else to turn to. So I think if mom and dad and kid or whomever can really sit down and just be honest and say, look, we don't really know necessarily the best path. We went to college 20, 30 years ago or didn't at all. I graduated from college before my mom did. She didn't have a ton to tell me about how to approach this. But I think if a parent and a kid can be honest with each other and have an open dialogue about this stuff, about, hey, you know what, let's just figure this out together. I think getting on the same page can be really helpful. There's a great podcast episode by a guy named Mitch Matthews, who's in Des Moines, and he talks about how to raise weird kids. And the premise in this, his kids are adventurous and unique, and a lot of it is because he says, I've tried so hard to keep a coach hat on instead of a parent hat. And when I coach, why am I college admissions coach, not a college admissions consultant, is because a coach is someone who helps somebody get to an agreed upon goal. And if parents will take off their parent hat, which typically comes down to there's a right, there's a wrong, and I'm right and you're wrong. But if the parent will take off their parent hat and put their coach's hat on and say, hey, what do you want to accomplish? And I try to relieve a lot of pressure from kids when I say, like, I don't ask, hey, what do you want to do? I ask, because there's a built-in 40-year sentence into that, I ask, what do you want to do next? And that frees them up to a wide array of options, but also to the flexibility of next doesn't mean forever. And so if a parent will walk alongside their kid, learn and in the process probably be open and willing to learning more about their kid than they are going to be learning about the right or wrong thing to do for college or for finances or anything. At the end of the day, my basic premise on parenting is, at the end of the day, I want my kid to say, I made a lot of mistakes, but my parent always had my back. They may not have supported the decisions I made, but they supported me. And so for parents to be able to allow their kid to have more ownership of this process, to say, hey, you know what? I don't know all the answers. Maybe it's okay if you try some things and they don't work out. But there's so much about this artificial calendar and this artificial timeline of events that parents are pushing their kids out the door because that's the next step, and not really having open conversations with them to say, hey, like, what's something that we can say is a purpose of college? We can prescribe it even if we can't necessarily, if it's not organic. And so a lot of times when I work with parents and students, I kind of reminding them how to just talk to each other and just how to be open and honest, and know that neither of them has the right answer. And that's probably the first time in their relationship where they've found common ground.
Right. Okay. So we're, again, having that meeting with a junior, we need to start talking. I mean, what kind of questions would we ask, or, can you give us a little coaching on how to coach compared to
absolutely.
how to dictate?
Yeah. I like to, I have a book coming out next summer called College Level Confidence. And it's this idea that if a kid really owns the stuff he's good at, he's ready. I mean, for whatever. But so often, the first chapter talks about, it's called Pomp and Circumstance, and why so many people have what I call circumstantial confidence, which is, I happen to have gotten a great SAT score, or I happen to be tall, so I can play basketball better than somebody else or whatever. So many of these external circumstantial confidence attributes. But I start really just sitting, like, celebrating the kid, like, hey, what are things that interest you? And at the end of the day, I'm not a gigantic fan of video games, but you can at least, if it is video games, you can start, okay, cool. Well, what about them? What are these things that I've probably seen as a parent as maybe trivial, or, in some cases annoyances or whatever, but the things that a kid does spring from what he believes, and what interests him is part of who he is. And so I think a lot of times with parents can start by saying, like, I have one of the activities that I have parents do, and they come up with 20 things that they think their kid is good at, and 20 things that their kid really enjoyed when they were like 5. And it really, for one, is a fun experience for parents, because it's intentional. It's an intentional time of celebrating the kid. It really shocks the kid because the things that especially that list of things that they really enjoyed when they were 5, the parent remembers like it was yesterday. The kid has no recollection of. But it really, like, the things you celebrate when you're a kid are a larger part of kind of really your identity and who you are. And you can find career interests out of that. I have a presentation I do for parents called "You Are a Career Coach," and how to, take your kids' values, take your kids' strengths, and help celebrate and find opportunities to do more of those things for those kids, because that's really where that's the inside out approach to a kid's career. Is you've got your passions, your interests, your talents, your skills, your accomplishments, your values, your strengths, and all of that is your inside out approach to, this is why I'm on this ball of mud. And if a parent is less concerned about whether or not the kid took out the trash and more concerned with, hey, you know what, like, this thing that you don't think is a big deal, that's pretty awesome, not, and whatever it is, it doesn't have to be academic. It could be anything, because most of our careers aren't very academic. It's a parent taking a little bit of time and saying, these are things that I really think you're great at. some schools I work with, they do a parent brag sheet on their kid. It's kind of like the other side of the kid's resume. That is powerful, because we don't always necessarily bring, are intentional about pointing out our kids' best.
Right. Absolutely. Do you think it's, I guess what I've heard in the past, and I think you've kind of alluded to it, but perhaps sometimes parents need to outsource some of this coaching because of the dynamic of a typical teenager is in the process of trying to separate themselves from parents. So sometimes it's, as the normal course of life, when the kid becomes a teenager, all of a sudden mom and dad don't know anything.
Well, there's that second Mark Twain quote then is, when I was 14, my dad was so ignorant I could barely stand to have him around. And when I turned 21, I was amazed at how much he learned in just 7 years.
Exactly. Is there a benefit, do you think, in perhaps outsourcing this either to a professional or maybe even a brother or sister, aunt or uncle, or, someone that's willing to do it, but not necessarily unpaid, but just not necessarily mom and or dad?
Absolutely. And obviously I'm biased because that's what I do. But I wouldn't do it if I didn't think it added value. My relationship with my parents was such that they didn't have credibility with me in pretty much any area, and that was all my fault. However, there wasn't much my parents could have done about that. So if the job was to be done, it was going to have to be done by someone else. And so I always recommend to parents and students, find a coach. It doesn't have to be me. It doesn't have to be someone you're paying, but the coach is someone who has either done what you want to do or who has helped other people do the same thing. So an aunt, an older brother, for parents, look around for other parents who have multiple kids who have taken different career paths or different college paths. Those guys know how to coach their kids. And yeah, just get in their back pocket. I know my kids are young. They're 6, 3, and 2. But when we were about to have our first, we looked around and we saw a couple in our church and we saw how their kids acted. And we said, tell us what you did. And we didn't listen to anybody else. And that's actually the biggest piece of advice I can have along this line is once you commit to listening to somebody, shut everybody else off. Because there's so much noise about this topic that if it's like trying to do 6 different diet plans at the same time. Like you're not going to have that consistency, that mental stability. So whoever you find, commit to them, and then what everybody else suggests is great, good for them, but that doesn't apply to what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. All right, let's change gears a little bit because you have a great download on your website, and it's called The 5 Warning Signs That Your Child is Applying to the Wrong College. And I found that to be interesting, and I'd like to just run through this a little bit and kind of expand on it. But so the first one is your child doesn't have a plan for how to use each school's unique resources to advance their life goals.
Yeah, and this one's kind of heavy if you're coming to this cold, because there's about 4 different things in there that you don't know about, which would be your kids' life goals, the school's unique resources, a plan to use those resources, and then kind of like how it all synergizes. But basically, the reason that there are 4,500 four-year institutions in the U.S. is because each does have something that's unique about them, even if it's just they're in a different spot in the country. But I look at this as, going back to this idea of putting out an RFP for a job. I want to be very specific with why I am going to this school. What do they have that will make me a better person, that will help me create an awesome life, and that will help me be prepared for my career? And so even if the school has those, as was my case with my undergrad at Bucknell, if they have those resources and I don't have a plan, then they may as well not have them. So that's definitely step 1.
Absolutely. So number 2 is your child is basing your college choices solely on U.S. News and World Report rankings.
That's right. Again, U.S. News is awesome, and they get so much junk for having the rankings. But if this is the only thing that you look at, this was my whole experience. I went to a really good school that was not a really good school for me, but at the end of the day, the U.S. News and World Report rankings are really great. It's a really great source to tell people that you're going to that school and for them to be impressed, not necessarily a judge of whether or not it's a great place for you. So, it sells them a lot of issues, and that's great. Good for them. It's a good approach. But and I don't think there's anything that speaks to this more than in 2012, 4 schools were cited for having given the U.S. News and World Report false information, inflated information to increase their rankings. And so it's just not a perfect way to approach this. Nice way to start it, but it cannot be the only thing.
Right, exactly. And what I always tell people about the rankings is, how do they know this school is 54 and that school is 58? Well, They have some sort of formula, right? Based on some sort of criteria. Do you even know what those criteria are? And would those be criteria that you would use if you were ranking schools?
Totally true.
And as you start thinking it through, it's like, okay, well, what do they base that on? And nobody knows. So, I mean, it's obviously somebody at U.S. News and World Reports knows, but in general,
that's right.
It's not a ranking system that you would use if you were going to design one for your child.
Correct. And I think about this as another way, Brad, is if I said to you, like, here's my ranking of top 10 restaurants in Philadelphia. Well, you might have a totally different list. Like, no, like, your number 8 is my number 1, and I don't even have any of the other ones are common. So much of it is personal preference. And that's why I again go back to, I need the students that I work with to know more about themselves than they do about the schools that they're going to, because that's what's more important.
Absolutely. All right, let's find number 3 here. Ooh, a girlfriend or boyfriend or best friend is going there. Oh, that's a that's a hot one.
This one was just kind of fun. I was like, this is a report I'm making, I'm creating for people. This one's just, partly to poke fun, but also just to say, this is go back to the restaurant piece. Like, if you really enjoy sushi and your girlfriend or boyfriend or best friend or somebody else doesn't, that doesn't mean that that's not a great restaurant for you. It's okay if you have different choices and different preferences. So while there's an element there of, it's cool, and I'm sure, you guys have with University of Wisconsin and we have with Penn State where, you may end up with going to school with relatives and so on, that being a driving force is saying, hey, because my cousin or my friend or my girlfriend knows what they want, I'm deferring to their preference to make my decisions for me. And that really is just an absence of ownership for the individual kid.
Right. Absolutely. And I think that you hit the nail on the head there. And I was going to mention that is, I think for a lot of kids that can't come up with criteria of their own, or they don't want to come up with criteria, or for whatever reason, a typical 16, 17-year-old, they go to a friend's house and an older brother of one of those friends comes home from a particular college, and he talks about how much fun he's having and the great parties or the great sporting events.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden now he's like, oh, there's somebody I know and trust and they love that school. What else do I need to know? I mean, that's a recommendation. That's where I want to go. And that, I think we see that a lot where it's not based, the recommendations aren't based on criteria that most parents would be appreciative of.
That's correct. There is I saw this a couple months ago. I don't know if you know The Onion, the satirical website.
Absolutely. It started here in Wisconsin.
Oh, all right.
University of Madison, I believe.
As well it should have, given their sense of humor. That fits very appropriately. But it said, and I'll find the link for it, and you can throw it in your show notes if you want, but it says 5 months of college planning prep undone by a 1 weekend visit to Penn State. And it's kind of that classic piece. But I've seen that though. There's a professor that I'm working with, doing some consulting with, and she said, we want you to come in and work more with our student experience, because that's really the differentiator of why these kids are coming and then staying. And that's a little bit scary for me, because she's not trying to improve academics or facilities, it's student experience. There are certain schools, and you go on these college visits, and they're country clubs.
Right.
Well, I'd want to go hang out there too for 4 years, but not at 45,000 a clip. If I'm not complementing that with a robust academic schedule, or whatever, or if I'm going to get out and think, man, that was a lot of fun, but I'm going to remember for the next 20 years because I'll be paying off loans. That's not how I want to remember my college experience.
Right, exactly. All right, number 4 is your child delays applying.
This one is this is a sign for parents. This kind of goes back to the coaching hat part of just being aware of what's going on. And this is default for parents, is to nag about this. If you've got, let's say we're recording this in October of 2016, and the November 1 early decision, early action deadline is approaching for seniors. And this report is warning signs. So if a parent sees this, the knee-jerk reaction for most parents is to get on them, which again really doesn't help the relationship a whole lot. But
right.
But really take a step back if you're a parent and you're noticing this, and you're like, okay, well, if this is something that the kid's supposed to be pretty excited about, and they may even say, like, since day one, hey, I want to go to the school and I'm going to go for here. But if they're not applying, if they're procrastinating on a lot of this stuff, just note that it might be something that they're hesitant about it. They're not owning this process. They're not saying, well, maybe some of the luster's been lost on this school or a college in general, that they're not chomping at the bit to get that application out the door.
Right. And I agree with that. As now that you mentioned, I never would have thought of it, but as you kind of think about it, it's like, well, maybe on some level they know it's not a good fit, and that's why they're delaying as well. And I think that you do something positive with that warning sign instead of, just like you said, just nagging them and getting them over the hump and getting it done.
Right. Sometimes a parent or a coach or somebody just holds a mirror up to the kid. You don't even have to say much. Like, hey, I noticed this, and just leave it. See what they say. Not like, hey, why are you doing this? It's just like, hey, I noticed that you're not really like hustling after these applications. Don't even ask a question to follow that. Just observe and wait. And the kid says, yeah. And then you wait even more. And then the kid, sometimes the kid will start talking about whatever. It might just be that they have 4 papers for English, and that they have to do because they are concurrently enrolled in school and doing all this homework. But sometimes that might be just an opportunity to say, you know what, Mom, I'm not as fired up about this as I thought I was going to be. And that's a great, again, open and honest and just relaxed conversation. Get off of this artificial timeline. I'm getting emails in March and April from really good schools saying, hey, if you have anybody yet left who hasn't applied yet, we still have spots. Mm-hmm. Slow down. You'll figure this out if you will take a breath.
Right. And I think part of it too might be if you spent more time earlier on. And I think that's one of the things that on the financial side, especially, but probably on the admission side as well, is that this process takes time and you need to get started earlier, as a sophomore or junior in high school, and not necessarily doing it hardcore, but at least having some of these conversations and the whys and the what do you want to be when you grow up type conversations, and making it so that when you get to application time, you're not first thinking about those questions while you should have been applying.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think if the heavy lifting in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade years really has more to do with just the questions you ask yourself more than the doing, at least in my realm.
Right. And it's the same on the financial side. Parents figuring out what they can afford and what they're willing to sacrifice to pay for college. It's easy to say, well, college is important, we're just going to do it. And then later on, when they realize what that really means, a lot of times they have second thoughts, or parents don't agree on what sacrifice is compared to what way overspending is. Right. So for some, that's a sacrifice. For others, that's a completely crazy idea to spend that kind of money.
Yes.
And so you need to get on the same page early as well. But anyway, number 5 is your child chooses the college with the simplest applications. I think that runs along the same lines of the delay tactic.
Yes, absolutely. And I think it's one that speaks to a kid's desire to actually apply himself and make this happen. I work with a woman named Jocelyn who runs the scholarship system. And she really she provides the same type of advice for kids in this case, which is if a scholarship doesn't have an essay, that's probably more of a way to collect your email address than it is to actually give you free money. And in some ways, I teach my students that how you are treated through the application process is a sign about how you'll be treated when you get to college. And the schools that want more from you, I think, are going to value you more while you're there. And that's so times when kids, and this is mostly December when they're on application fatigue and they've written, they've all these different schools and you come up to this school is one more, I'll just apply, just because it's part of common application. And this school has, 3 supplemental essays and I've put it off, going back to number 3, I've put it off. Well, you know what? I'm not going to apply there. Right. If you've done any sort of legwork, you've just cut that out from under yourself to say, well, there's a reason that I wanted to apply there. And then at the end of the day, kids who don't have a plan, this is very often happens because at the end of the day, they just say, well, any college will do. And so any college will do. Right. If you're going to give that little forethought and work, then you're right. Any college will do. But unfortunately, you're not going to be really happy with the result.
Right. Absolutely. All right. Well, that was that document is available at your website, and I will put some links in. But we need to wrap things up. So can you tell people how to get more information if they want to connect with you as far as where your books, websites are and that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Yes. And I'll make sure those links are provided to you as well for your page. But my website is mycollegelifecoach.com. And I have a podcast of over 50 episodes. I do interviews with parents, with current college students. We do like college reviews. If it's a current student at a college currently, I ask them about their experience, like what it's really like there, and not just what the website looks like. And then, free reports, blogs, and all that. And I also run an online coaching community called the Academy for parents and students, where they can find their true north. They can pick colleges and actually help them not only apply to college and do their essay stuff, but one of my favorite programs is called College Max, which is once they've gotten into school and they've decided the summer before they go to college, they plan out how to really get the most value out of it. So all of that is at mycollegelifecoach.com. And actually, Brad, for your listeners, I have a guide for kind of the non-financial considerations to keep college costs in check. And it's called the 5 Facets of College Finances. And that's available at mycollegelifecoach.com/taming college. So they can head there and then download that document and really learn a lot more how to complement the stuff that you're working with them on about reducing the cost and how to 2 and 3x their college value once they do get that degree.
Yes, absolutely. So I appreciate all the great information, and we'll stay in touch.
Sounds great, Brad. Have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye. All right, that was a great interview with Sam. I know I learned a lot in just kind of discussing some things with him, and hopefully you did too. As always, we have show notes available at tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/99 for this particular episode. And you can get all the links as well as information on how to get to Sam's website, etc. So go ahead and go to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com/99. All that will be available there. I really appreciate you listening, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Taming the High Cost of College podcast. Now it's time for you to take action. Head to tamingthehighcostofcollege.com for show notes, bonus content, and to leave feedback for Brad. The next step on your college journey starts now.
Brad Baldridge is a registered representative of Cambridge Investment Research and an investment advisor representative of Cambridge Investment Research Advisors, a registered investment advisor. Securities are offered through Cambridge Investment Research Incorporated, a broker-dealer and member of FINRA and SIPC. Brad owns 2 companies, Baldridge Wealth Management and Baldridge College Solutions. The Baldridge companies are not affiliated with Cambridge Investment Research.